This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It's episode 383 of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm Jamie Bogner, and like last week's episode, today's comes from live interviews I did during Three Sons Brewing's Lumberjack Day Festival in Dania Beach, Florida a few weeks ago. First up is Alex Laws of Dublin, Ireland's Whiplash. He's an incredible character, not afraid to tell you how he really feels, but his technique is impeccable, and we talked for a while about how to really make dry Irish stout. The second interview is with Greg Ziemian of Mostów in Wrocław, Poland. Greg jumped into my DMs back in 2022 and has been trying to get me over to Poland ever since. He co-founded one of the leading Polish craft beer festivals, Beer Geek Madness, helped found the Polish Association of Craft Breweries. As an aside, that association has invited me to their symposium in December to speak and to judge their annual competition, and I am really looking forward to spending some time in Krakow and Wrocław for that. Poland's a hotbed for craft beer in Europe, and I can't wait to explore more. But this interview with Greg is a bit of an amuse-bouche to spark some interest. In the meantime, of course, the 3.8% mixed culture grodziskie with smoked pears that they were pouring at Lumberjack Day was right up my alley. Before we get into the interviews, a few thanks and a few thoughts on one of the biggest weekends for craft beer in the world, aka the Great American Beer Festival. I just want to say I really enjoyed this revamped format this year. It was tighter, it was a more festive vibe. Rather than focusing on geographies, Joe Stang and I would cruise sections. We discovered new breweries we hadn't seen on previous passes, tasted a lot of great beer. But more importantly, it was just full of beer lovers having fun. I often joke that I go more for the people than for the beer, but the beer was great this year. I also had some memorable ciders and seltzers. Also, big thanks to the folks at YCH for wrapping the Craft Beer and Brewing team deeper and deeper into the Alpha King Challenge this year. Joe, our review coordinator, Paul, and I all judged through the final table of this illustrious competition. And congrats to the first place winner, Bearded Tang, second place, Russian River, third place, Ghost Town, and Jesse's Pick winner, Amalgam, all incredible beers. With that said, let's get into these interviews I recorded a few weeks ago. But first, at G&D Chillers, they always strive to build great chillers. Partner with them as you build great beer, but don't just take my word for it.
This is Andy Joint of Big Grove Brewery. We've been using G&D chillers from the beginning, and from our original 3.5 barrel pub system up to our production brewery, we've been able to rely on G&D to provide a high quality chiller, help us with design and layout, and provide support whenever we need it.
Choose G&D Chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring of your new G&D chiller. And ProBrew is excited to now offer 2 to 4 week lead times on all in-stock ProFill rotary can fillers and seamers. These models are available in 100 to 300 can per minute filling speeds and are built with a focus on scalability and low dissolved oxygen pickup. This special lead time is only while supplies last, so send them an email at contactus@probrew.com or call them at 262-278-4945. ProBrew, brew your beer. Also, are you struggling to source affordable citrus ingredients due to market fluctuations? Try Old Orchard's flavored craft juice concentrate blends, which mimic straight concentrates at a better price point and with a more reliable supply. Old Orchard's citrus-flavored blends include blood orange, grapefruit, lemonade, lime, and tangerine. To learn more and request your free samples, head on over to oldorchard.com/brewer. Joining me is Alex Laws from Whiplash. Welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Thanks for having me. It's fantastic.
You're phenomenally dressed. I am incredibly jealous of your immaculate, fashion style. You are doing South Florida like nobody's business here. But over the last couple of days that we've been hanging out, I've enjoyed your series of hot takes, your strong opinions, and your just unabashed ability to share those. And so I can't wait to talk to you about your thoughts on brewing, because so a little bit of background on Whiplash. You all are in Metro Dublin. And maybe tell me start things off with giving me a little bit of your background in brewing, and then how Whiplash came to be.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So we're in Dublin. I suppose with a brewing city like that, the only game in town is Guinness. You know, that was one of the biggest breweries in the world. It was the biggest brewery in the world before Budweiser in St. Louis kind of happened. And 1 in every 5 people in Dublin were reliant on a wage from Guinness in 1900. So my family was no different. My father worked for Guinness. He was a shop steward. He was a drayman. He delivered kegs. He worked all over the place. His uncles were coopers. And we go back to about 1820 in terms of just working at the brewery. We were all coopers there.
Wow.
When I started, I was working what I thought was a very small kind of period. I thought I was going to do like 2 or 3 months. And it was a pretty cool job. I got a temporary job to distribute the beers, the free beers to pensioners around Christmas time, which is a very busy period. So they have a big rush because they give everyone their free issue of 2 beers per day. When you're a pensioner, you pop in, you get like 8 crates of beer for Christmas and you bring that home. And I never told them that my dad worked for Guinness, and that was quite funny because like everyone who was coming in the door, and he was retired as well, they were all like, hey, like, Simba's here, this is amazing. I remember you when you were a kid and stuff, and they were just thought I was amazing at customer service, but I just actually knew all these old folks just from the community and Irish traditional music and, you know, the city that community kind of built, you know. And then they were like, well, do you want to work here full time? And I said, yeah, sure. So, like, I got a full-time job there, and I ended up staying for 8 years for what I thought was going to be 2-3 months. And then my career just started in beer that way. So I had no intention working any more than a couple of months, and I've just been in beer since I left school, like within a month or 2. And worked there for a long time, wanted to get into brewing. Guinness is a closed shop. It's a big brewery. They were one of the first breweries in the world to start hiring scientists instead of brewers.
Right.
And they still have that policy. So, you know, you don't get a job as a brewer in Guinness unless you're a chemical engineer or a mechanical engineer. And they just take people through graduate programs. So there was no actual way for me to actually work as a brewer there. And then one day I brewed beers in there, and I got an attention
at that scale. It is just scale. It's an industrial production.
4 million hectoliters per year.
Right.
You can basically just say that's barrels. What's that? Like 3.5 million barrels a year?
7, I think is the conversions.
Yeah, 1.17 sort of thing. Yeah, that's a lot of beer. You know, that's fine. But I tried working in there. I tried to get a job in there, and they were like, well, look, it's just chemical engineer and mechanical engineer. And I was studying English literature and film at the time. Yeah. But I kept getting offered brewers jobs because I was a home brewer at home. I just decided to learn that way. And what I didn't realize was that was your secret weapon in that trade, because everyone who comes into industrial brewing only works with like just grain silos. And like the malt is the malt. It's just literally just that silo. It's a pale malt. And then you've got the likes of roast extracts or isomerized hops and stuff, and that's just pumped in basically. But what happens is the bigger brewers, the bigger breweries don't know the range of actual raw materials that you have available and what they all taste like, and even, you know, the difference between different producers. You know, how does Fawcett's chocolate malt compare to Wireman or compare to Baird's and stuff? And as a home brewer, you learn all of that. And that got the attention of some of the guys in there, and they really wanted to get me in, but just the structure around that just meant it wasn't going to happen. And then what happened was there was a big regional brewery kind of starting up, and one of the master brewers in Guinness called me and said, listen, I'm splitting away, I'm doing this, but you have a skill set that I don't have. You can make recipes and you know all of these raw materials, and do you want to come with me? This is your road in. And I said, yeah. I mean, I was turning down brewers jobs, and I just said, I'm not going to turn this down anymore. I'm just going to do it. And I went there. That was a brewery called Roy River. That's where I met my business partner, Alan. He was operations manager there. He's one of the founders. And once we went in there, started making good beer. And the brewer who brought me along the way, and he went back to Guinness, and then they asked me if I wanted the head brewer job, and I didn't, but I said yeah anyway. And I needed to learn that because it was like, it's hard, you know, and you should do the hard shit, you know, you should really focus on that. So I did that, and that nearly broke me. And we were making a lot of, you know, pale ales, red ales, and stouts, and that's all Ireland drank at the time. And both myself and Alan, my business partner now, we're getting pretty bored with that, as you would. And coming here to Florida, it's incredible, like the variety of types of beers that you have, and sours and imperial stouts. But we were going to those beer festivals and we were tasting those beers. And we're like, why is there nothing in our market that has this? I want to drink this. And we basically said, if honestly, we're at a stage now where this, this craft beer thing has been happening for long enough that it's actually the likes of us who have to do this if it's going to happen at all. So we set up Whiplash. So both of us were still working in that brewery. And we seen inefficiencies in the way that the production was done. There was, the brew length was 25 hectolitres, but we would brew 8 times a day. We would just fill 100 hect tanks, go again and again and again. It's a 24-hour operation. But when you look at like a 25 hectolitre tank beside it, you're just brewing the same brew into the 25 and into the 100 next door, and you're just doing 2 CIPs, you're doing 2 transfer runs, you're doing it all to put it into the same blend in the BBT downstream. And I said to the guys, look, this is really inefficient. Do you mind if I just rent these tanks? If I set up a little company and I rent them, because it puts a lot of pressure on the bottling line and stuff, and like bottling line needs to run for a long time. And I said, there's these mobile canning guys who are getting set up on the market. How would you feel if I just did a 25 hectolitre batch and I got them in, and then it doesn't, we just increased the volume of production. And when we're doing these CIPs, it's just attached to this interesting beer. And they said, that's fine. It's cool. They were nice people. And that's what we did. We just started brewing. I think their first year for Whiplash, we were a gypsy brewery or a, contract, but I was brewing the beers.
Right.
And we just stuck it in. We just said, what's the most interesting thing?
You were brewing beers for the brand, and then you were also brewing for your own side brand.
Exactly.
Same place, same brew house.
Same brew house. And when that happened, consumers really reacted. They loved it. They loved that was happening in Ireland. And we got a huge amount of support. We didn't make a huge amount of noise or anything like that. And I was just delivering them in the back of a really beat up hatchback car to all of my friends in the industry and all the bottle shops and all the small bars. And then, Untapped kicked in, and I have a lot of issues with ratings and Untapped and stuff like that for what they've done. But that really meant a lot to us at the time. And all of a sudden, we're like the top rated brewery in Ireland. We're one of the top rated in Europe. It's like, and it just exploded. And people were like, well, this is great. But we were only making small batches. It's like 100 cases at a time. The first beer that we did was a porter, robust porter. The second beer that we did was a double IPA. And then we switched it up. Actually, the third beer that we made was True Love Waits, which we're pouring today. We've brewed it for the first time in 8 years, I think. And it's here at the festival, which is great, and it's insanely popular. And it was very natural, and that's how we got going. And then eventually, about 2 years into that, we just said, well, we just do this full time. And that's how it happened.
And now you have your own production brewery.
We have our own production brewery. Tiny little brewery, the little brewery that could. It's a 10 hectolitre brew house. But we
it's a little different scale than you were brewing on before.
It was 25 there, but we were 24 hours. We'd brew 7 to 8 a day in a 24-hour scale. I designed the kit. We didn't have a lot of money. We couldn't pay for a Rolls Royce kind of brew house. And the only way that we could kind of make it work with the money that we built up from gypsy brewing for that long was if I designed the kit myself. And the one thing that I didn't want to touch was lauter technology, because lautering is just voodoo. That's built over many, many years of really learning how those things work. And I said, here's a really good option. I've worked on one before in Guinness, and a mash filter would actually solve a lot of problems here. And what we didn't realize, the mash filter times that it gave us would actually allow our small brew house to be a very powerful brew house. So we will comfortably, we start brewing at 7 a.m. We finish brewing at 7 p.m. Everyone's out the door. We'll comfortably get 5 brews in that period of time.
Just because that mash filter is so time efficient,
quick, and
then it's also efficiency. The amount of extract you get from that is outrageous compared to
Yeah, it's fantastic. You can get 110% if you want. They're mostly built for whiskey distilleries and macro breweries. You can do that. I'm shocked that that there's not many like big stout breweries here in Florida using the mash filter.
Right.
That's a fantastic solution to these huge beers that people are making.
Right, that get such terrible efficiency through traditional mash methods.
We can mash in, and I'll use like quarts to the pound kind of thing, which is basically the same as liters to the kilo. We can mash in as low as 2 quarts to the pound, which means that we're starting a boil at 26 degrees Plato. What we also do when we're making those big beers is that we take our weak worts and we rechannel them into the mash mixer, and then we mash in on those again. So we can start a boil at 32 degrees Plato before we do anything as well. So like we never set it up for that. We were making New England's, and low-ABV technology is terrible for like it's great for
using those high protein grains and whatnot. Yeah,
and beta glucan and stuff, and it's great for making pills and making lagers. It's terrible for that, and we needed a solution. So much of what we needed to do was making hazy beer. Our base recipes are all wheat. We get more haze stability long term from proline protein, and we wanted to really push the boundaries of texture of what we wanted to do, and mash filter was absolutely perfect solution. So that's the most expensive part of the setup. We have 5 vessels on the brew house. We have a mash mixer. We have a separate cereal cooker, which we mostly use as a decoction vessel.
Yeah.
We have the mash mixer then, and we have an upper back, which is like a wort receiver, just in case the boil kettle's occupied. Boil kettle works on an external calandria, so it's really energy efficient that way. And then we've 3-to-1 ratio whirlpool downstream. And then from end to end, we can get a brew through in 4.5 hours and pretty high extract, and then we kick it out. And when we went small, we when you're designing yourself, you can kind of make all those decisions. You can make decisions about the width of the pipe work, where you're going to get mechanical shear, where you're going to get turbulent flow. And when you're working on the hot side, you can really afford a lot of push. You can buy a bigger pump. You can push it a little bit harder. So we're into the whirlpool in 3 minutes. We chill down
3 minutes.
Yeah, we chill down to 60 degrees in 4 minutes. We can kick out in 10 minutes if we want. If it's, if we're in a rush, and just everything just works quite quick. When you're working with a mash filter, you grind so fine. You have immediate access to all of the enzyme in the mash. So we had loads of issues at the early days where beers were finishing too dry. And then what we realized was we have immediate access to all of that enzyme. And for us to get like a mash profile and a finished beer profile of like 75% attenuation, it's a 20-minute mash, and then we're out. Because the mash filter is just working in that way. And it makes great lagers as well. It's a solution to hazy beer, but like it does the basic stuff incredibly well. Really, really well. So we're really happy with it. We'll fly that flag, absolutely. And anyone who's kind of thinking of stepping into it, they got to call us, because we're the pioneers of this stuff and we've made all of the mistakes, and I wouldn't recommend anyone do it without talking to somebody who's actually done it, because man, you have to just like Lewis, our lead brewer. He's like, you just have to completely learn how to brew again, and he knows.
Yeah, what are
stuff.
What are some of the biggest changes that you hit with brewing to a mash filter?
There's some of the stuff that you think about when you're using like reverse osmosis, for instance, and you're loutering with that. You're going to get a really, really clean lauter without much polyphenol and stuff. But what happens is, when you're in a pressurized environment, which a mash filter ultimately is, you don't think about the solubility of the actual liquor that you're putting in there. So it just makes it much more easy for polyphenol and astringency to make its way into the wort, because you have no ions in there. So that's a big issue. Actually dialing in the pressure systems that you want to work at is, we used our mash filter company's suggested pressures. That works great if you're making 9% high gravity industrial lager, because that's going to get watered down by half at the point of pack.
Right.
You're trying to throw dry hops on top of that, you're in trouble, man. You're in real trouble. And we were like, why is this happening? And like, we didn't have the hubris to go, we're just going to do it our own way in the early days, because like, you're effectively pioneering in this stuff. The lessons learned: take down the pressures. Treat it like you want to do a lauter ton. 110% extract tastes like 110% extract, and don't go that direction. You don't have to do that. It's fine if you're making 9% lager and watering it down. It's not fine if you're making real beer. But at the other ends, the benefits that it gives you, You can make a high strength
So that
beer.
pressure is what's driving that kind of tannic extraction.
Big time.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what people warn you about, and they're right, but like nobody kind of quite knows what's going on there.
Right.
And that's what we found is using the recommended settings just got to be thrown out the window fast, and if you want to make good hoppy beer, it's great. Imperial stouts, oh my god, it's absolutely fantastic because you just keep so much of the nuance of the actual malt profile together when you don't have to boil it that hard. Like doing long boils for 40 odd hours or something like that. I mean, like I get it. If I was on a mash tun and I was running that and I wanted to get my extract and I'm not putting in sugars and stuff, that's fantastic. But if you can start to boil at 36 Plato and you can just boil for 2 or 3 hours. Kyle from Horus brewed with us. He was really impressed with just using the mash filter system, and he's a big barley wine imperial stout guy, and he was like, yeah, that works great. And like there's a lot of the nuance of that stout that's left. Plus, you don't have to boil too long. You can get an imperial stout with a bit of foam on the head. That's worth a lot. We do nitro imperial stouts sometimes as well, and the foam stays on the top, and it's fun. So there's loads of fun things you have to do, but yeah, it can be a pain in the ass sometimes. Yeah.
We'll be back in a sec with more of the interview, but first, experience distinct transparency and juiciness with Omega Yeast's Daybreak 5. Using their Lumina technology, Omega genetically eliminated haze in the popular British 5 strain, allowing you to preserve the fruit-boosting prowess while achieving crystal clarity. It's perfect for modern West Coast IPAs. Learn more at info@omegayeast.com. And keep your brewery running smoothly with 5-star chemicals. Their cleaning solutions are specifically formulated to meet the unique needs of breweries, ensuring that your equipment stays clean and free of harmful bacteria and contaminants. From cleaning fermenters to kegs, they've got a solution for every step of the brewing process. Use 5-star chemicals today and taste the difference in your brews. Also, can seams should not just be handled by your OEM. Relying on outside help to confirm your product is shelf ready puts your final product and your bottom line at risk. Take back control with RSS Macklin. They provide the training and resources breweries of all sizes need to ensure the exceptional quality of their product remains the same from beginning to end. For more information, visit rssmacklin.com. That's rssmacklin.com, or email service@rssmacklin.com. Now, back to Alex Laws of Whiplash. Talk to me about how it can preserve more of that character.
Yeah, every brewer in the world knows the longer you're boiling the beer, the more homogenous this body character is actually going to become at that stage.
Right.
So taking every step to remove that aspect. Look, if you're making a really high ABV beer, like the protein's not going to survive that level of alcohol to a certain extent. You can't get around that. But if you're using enough chip malt, if you're using enough flake barley, if you're using enough really, really, surfactants, positive, like really good haze, foam stability, not haze, and that can hold together. But I do find, and this is not a criticism, they're just different things, different value systems, is that if you're boiling for a long time, you get a very homogenous Maillard reaction. This is the one flavor. And doing this complex malt build, like we use a little bit of Rauch malt in our imperial stout and stuff. If I was to boil that for that period of time, that's just not going to carry over after the end of the fermentation. We can get away imperial stout. We can send something to FV at 40 to 45 after a 2-hour boil. If we whack up the steam and all of that holds together, so it hasn't just caramelized into the one mix of molasses. It has that. It has that nuance. It has that complexity. And that's often what, people who drink our beers kind of say back. It's like you just get this linear step, and it's like, oh, I can taste this, I can taste that, I can taste that. And that's what we try to chase anyway. Not everyone has the same outlook, and it's a completely subjective thing. But I do want to taste the level of brown malt that's in an imperial stout and the level of chocolate, and kind of try to, as a brewer, pick out, are you using faucets? Are you using French and Jups? Or and if that's still in there, that's important to me, Well,
that's the core of it, right? You're trying to build this dynamic range, and you need to have these midtones to support both the higher sharp notes as well as these deeper char and roast notes, and you want to have some of that kind of caramelly middle note, but also characterful space. And then the same thing can happen through this process where everything gets compressed and too tight, and that kind of and lose that kind of full spectrum. But it's interesting to think about using the mash filter in that kind of way.
Yeah. And we don't have to add too much sugar, and we don't add sugar really at all unless we're looking for that molasses kick from a Muscovado edition or something which has its own flavor, and I love that. So yeah, highly recommend it. If somebody's brewing big stouts, this is a fantastic solution to that type of thing. The only thing about the low pressure end of having to brew with a mash filter is your hop character, your dry hopping process, and that's where it becomes a problem. But you can use the standard 500 millibar sort of settings that the mash filter company gives you and make incredible stouts. So
talk to me about like how does that interaction between the mash filter and hopping work? I don't know that I follow exactly the concern that you're outlining there.
We raised it. He was in Charlie Bamford was in town a couple of weeks ago, and we they asked us to sponsor it, and we gave a lot. He was doing a talk on haze stability and polyphenol, and Barney, our quality manager, is now Dr. Barney, and Dr. Barney raised with him. He's like, how is this interaction happening between the polyphenol, the hops, and the polyphenol that you're looking for to create haze stability in the wort? And he was like, well, I don't know. So I'm sure there's someone listening to this who's able to say directly, yeah, this is exactly what's going on. But look, I think from where I'm tasting it, you're going to have a natural level of polyphenol that's undetectable to your palate at one stage, basically. And if you push that forward, that's going to taste absolutely fantastic as a lager until you throw on that raw organic material on top. And it's always the extraneous material, it's always the vegetable material that's actually given us that bite, that hot bite, and we've had to pivot away from this. So our focus has always been T90s in small beer, and advanced like T45s, cryo, spectrum, that sort of stuff in the big beer.
Right.
The problem has been the hop creep. And that's what everyone has had to do. They've had to make small ABV. Well, I mean, it's not a big issue in the United States because, really people attach ABV with quality quite often here. You can't, like a session beer over here is like 6.5%. And for us, we make 2.5% IPAs. We make 3, like our biggest seller is 3.8. But you're really exposed to hop creep at those areas. And we would like to be working with T90s because that nice round polyphenol that you're actually getting from a hop, when it's pleasant, actually fills out the mouthfeel. When it's getting into a bigger and bigger beer, you're just kind of concentrating all of these things, and it gets unpleasant, basically. But the big issue has been the hop creep, and we've had beers on the market for 8 years, and for some of our beers in the last 4 years, they've become more susceptible to hop creep with the exact same recipe, which tells you something. Which is basically hop growers are not kilning at the temperatures that they've claimed, even on the sheets and stuff like that. They're killing
at even lower temperatures.
They're killing lower. Yeah. They're killing lower. And there was a good paper from Stone and Wood in Australia, and they said, right, we're all trying to find a solution to the hop creep, and Vinnie Colorzo is all about like flash kilning at high temperature for a short period of time, which is basically saying the same thing. If you bring up the temperature of the hops for a shorter period of time, the diastase is inactive. And these guys are basically saying in Stone and Wood that they got a pasteurizer. They're a fairly big brewery. And they were like, right, when we said, right, we'll inactivate the yeast. You inactivate the yeast, fair enough. When they were like, actually, all we needed to do was inactivate the diastase. So the diastase only needs 1 PU. So that's kind of confirmed to everybody that the kilns and the hops themselves never get up to 60 degrees. Which is, sorry, I'm in metric here as well. But like one minute at 60 degrees is 1 pasteurization unit. And when you look at the analysis sheets, it's like, yeah, it's gotten up to that temperature. Yeah, it definitely hasn't. So we've had that issue anyway. To bring it back to the roundness, the polyphenol, the dry hopping into small beer, we've been putting the advanced products and reducing the level of extraneous organic material in the small beers. And then all the T90s have been going in the big beer because the level of alcohol kills the diastase as well. It just denatures it in high alcohol situations. So we got a pasteurizer. So Brewcon brought us in a flash pasteurizer that they've built specifically for beer, which is nice because the problem with pasteurization is, a lot of the technology is really interchangeable. And oftentimes you go to, big companies and they're like, oh yeah, this works great for milk and orange juice and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, yeah, but what's it going to do to my beer foam? And when we talked to BrewCon, they were like, yeah, exactly. That's, we're going to do bigger pipe work.
Right.
We're going to do less bends. And they built this one, which is the first thing they've ever done that goes as low as 1 pasteurization unit consistently. So we just commissioned that a couple of weeks ago. But I think the big focus is non-alcoholic beer. It's not really, our beers are stable, it's fine, we don't need a pasteurizer to put at it, but it allows us to play in the non-alcohol space, basically. And that's where, I don't know if that's a big thing in the US, but it's pretty big in Ireland, and it's pretty big in Europe. And, if I don't have that non-alcoholic beer ready for January,
that's true.
It's not good.
I think it's growing by leaps and bounds, and even just this calendar year in particular, I noticed. I mean, even I've been drinking much more non-alcoholic beer over this year, dealing with some various health stuff, and I can't stop drinking beer because this is my life. But it's really nice to have that non-alcoholic beer.
It's getting so much better.
Yeah,
the options are like the mouthfeel, everything. The glycerol it's getting so much better. A non-alcoholic beer back in the day when it was just the stream of 5% beer that just had its alcohol stripped out. Those beers are awful, man. They're still out in the market. I don't want to name names, but they're terrible.
Yeah.
And it's gotten so much better.
The quality in general is just improved immeasurably in the last 2 years. And United States, we've got companies like Athletic that have been really pushing flavor, doing a phenomenal job of building flavorful NA beers. But one of my favorites is the Guinness NA. I mean, I don't know if that's a hot take for you, but
I haven't tasted it. But
it's a pretty flavorful non-alcoholic beer.
That's cool.
And maybe we use that as a segue to talk about Irish dry stout, because we're drinking a little bit of it right now. We talked about big stouts. We've talked about some hazy IPA.
Yeah.
An approach to that. But I'm curious to get your take, because obviously this is such a classic Irish beer style. I don't know that we've ever talked on the podcast about dry Irish stout, but I want to get your take. How do you approach it? Obviously, it's rife with tradition. There's lots of weight behind it. People have expectations. How do you think about it as a small craft brewer approaching building your own characterful, sessionable, small Irish dry stout? This one served on nitro here at the festival.
Yeah, thank you. It's how would you approach it? How would you approach the brew one? I mean,
how do you think about from the start, writing a recipe that is both reverent to the tradition, but also establishes your point of view as a craft brewer?
Yeah, that's cool. So I did a piece on this in Ziemian just last year for people trying to brew their nitro stout at home. What you have to remember is, and people think that nitrogen adds sweetness to beer, which is a really common misconception. What happens is you need a certain amount of CO2 in there to make the nitrogen work, basically. So basically CO2 is in there, the nitrogen holds the foam an awful lot better. But at the levels of CO2 that you're working at, you're maybe at anywhere from 1 volume to 1.5 volumes. At that level, carbonic acid appears sweet to your palate. So what happens is the beer is actually that little bit sweeter. So if you're trying to make something that's actually balanced, you need to cut out the things that are actually adding sweetness into your beer. So what you do is you just cut all of that out. Just use your brown malts, use your chocolate, use whatever you want. But at the point of adding crystal or carapils or anything like that, just drop it. Okay, and that's a great way to approach it. For us, we're still playing around with the level of CO2 that we're using. If I was in a big macro brewery, it'd be a very small amount of CO2. And the reason being is because, you're running all your own taps. You're never on somebody's special line where they need, and the big nitro stouts from big companies, they need a lot of pressure to push them out to get the same level of cascade. So we have a different balance of our CO2. And as a result, we change our malt profile to suit that as well. From a craft perspective of doing what we're doing, it's not hard. It's not hard to brew a better beer than that. I'm sorry, but you don't. I try not to get into Like, we're better because of, what we're not. But like, look, there's good, British floor malt in that, like traditionally made, lots of flavor in the actual floor malt. We use a lot of brown malts. We use a lot of aromatic malt, but like dry, like Belgian style. We use a little bit of chocolate just to get exactly the level of color that we're looking for, and we use a little bit of flaked as well. Actually, just to just take down the fan levels a little bit, just for amino nitrogen. Just it can get a little bit of a bite with our yeast. It's just every yeast has a different fan demand. Mm-hmm. But when you're a big macro brewery and you're trying to make what's effectively the cheapest industrial beer in the world to make, which what we're talking about is, right, that's 60% feed grade shit, like malts. Okay, it's 40. Yeah. It's not malts. It's just feed grades, like horse, feed, and then it's 40% malt. Okay, and then there's roast extract that goes in downstream, but it could go either way. You're brewing the same mash, and one stream goes over, and that's a very well known American, super light lager. And then the next day, the exact same stream goes into here, and then it gets, the pump on the iso hop gets turned up a little bit, and that gets 40 BUs, and all of a sudden, it gets a little bit of roast extract downstream, and that's a different beer. And that's how cynical that stuff is. And that's why I say it's not that hard if you just do things the right way.
Right.
Like, there's no we've had this huge trick by actually putting hop material into a kettle. Industrial breweries aren't built to actually take hop materials anymore. It's literally just an IBC and a peristaltic pump that pumps in iso hop downstream, and everything just happens that way. So what we found is this is so much more stable long term. That beer tastes the same 9 months on. It tastes the exact same. Wow. And it holds together because it's just it is a stable style of beer to make. So that's how we approach it. We approach it just going, well, I want that level of character, but I also want a vanishing finish. I want to go, right, that's actually quite a big flavor, and then it just disappears off my palate. So we've always chased that. We don't always achieve it, but that's a huge thing for us when we're getting fine dialing things that aren't just specials, that are like a beer that we just do day in, day out. Right. And that sort of stuff comes into water profiles, pitching rates, and overall carbonation levels and the like as well. Final pH is so important to just getting that vanishing finish is what we're trying to chase. And absolutely. You met the guys in the lift. They were back for their fifth sample of it, and literally going that's my favorite beer. The thing, we brought a knife to a gunfight here, man. This was Imperial Stout Town, and everyone's coming back over. It's like, can I get a bigger glass of that? Because it just disappears off your palate. It's a completely different experience, And
when I taste your, dry Irish stout, what I don't get that I get from that specific other largely produced one is this huge hit of acidity. Yeah. That they find sharpness and they find definition by really pumping acidity, and it tastes, it's very perceptible acidity. And that acidity tucks right into that kind of malt character, and you really taste the malt more than you taste some of those other characters in it.
Thank you. We're a way higher pH, and because we don't have infections in our brewery. You run a big industrial macro brewery that's going for a long time, you got a lot of infections. Literally the stuff is probably just has just started there. It's evolved within that space. That has actually happened, So the lower pH is essential when you're big brewing to basically stop that growth as quick as it is. And if you're in big brewing, sometimes if you don't pasteurize on day 7 or day 9, you're toast. That's it. You just got to throw it all out. So they operate to that low pH, really, really to just stop an emergency. We don't have that issue. So yeah. So
it's a business-driven decision.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's the base stuff. It works, but lower pHs just seem a little bit more sessionable sometimes. They got that little backbite, but they don't have that soft, round, vanishing finish that you're trying to chase. And that's all water.
As we finish up here, are there any other beers that you as a brewer get really excited about brewing today?
Yeah. that I've tried from other breweries here as
or
well.
beers that you make that may be outside of this realm of expectation that we might have, because we think of Whiplash as an Irish brewery.
Sure.
But you're a brewery of the world also. And so what are the most interesting challenges that you're tackling today?
That's a great question. Low ABV is huge for us, and one of the beers that really brought us a lot of notoriety was Northern Lights, our micro IPA, which we coined the term. It was 2.8%.
Micro IPA.
Micro IPA.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
That's in tank. It's back on the market now. Thankfully, the creep isn't an issue now with our fancy new machine. I get excited about that. Honestly, that sort of stuff, just going as low as we possibly can and getting that balanced and full and big and stuff without having to use, crazy additions or adjuncts or anything like that, and just doing like hardcore, like, okay, are we going to do a starch mash? Are we going to, do this or do that? That's the most interesting stuff to us at the moment, really. Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
So you watch this space. We'll be going lower and lower until it's nothing. And we'll be happy
low
there.
Can you go?
That's it. Yeah. We've
Yeah.
got a non-alcohol tank. I'm really excited about it. That's where we're at.
Can't wait.
Thanks,
Well,
Jamie.
Alex, if people want to learn more about Whiplash or they want to try your beer themselves, where can they learn more about it, and where can they taste it?
Yeah, just follow us on our socials, on our Instagram, on our Facebook, just Whiplash Beer, and come to Dublin or, many of the countries, just not the US right now. But come and taste it in Fidelity Bar in Dublin, and we'll see you there.
Well, at some point here, I'm going to have to get out to your brewery and go see this mash press filter in person. This was a remarkably technical conversation
Thank
here at Three Sons Lumberjack Day. I deeply appreciate your
Thanks very
approach
much.
to brewing. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you.
Next up is my interview with Greg Ziemian of Mostów. But first, Indie Hops breeds new hop varieties to help brewers captivate beer lovers. Brewers worldwide trust Indie's unique varieties, Strata, Lorient, Luminosa, Meridian, and Audacia, to modernize, brighten, and diversify their beer lineup. Indie also offers classics that thrive in Oregon terroir, such as Chinook, Crystal, and Sterling. Thoughtfully crafted and selected hops to meet your brewing needs. Visit indiehops.com/podcast to discover what's new in hop flavors. Indie Hops, life is short. Let's make it flavorful. And Berkeley Yeast, founded by bioengineers, it's yeast that's designed to improve flavor, quality, and consistency, increase efficiency, and save you money. If you've been following yeast, I'm sure you've heard about their strains. Super Bloom strains make classic hops flavors. Fresh strains keep diacetyl low, even with large hop additions. Tropic strains make a tropical bouquet reminiscent of the finest Southern Hemisphere hops, and they just dropped new strains that are even more futuristic. Nationwide free shipping. Mention this podcast for 20% off your first order. Also, if you appreciate the precision and craftsmanship of wood-aged craft beer, you've got to check out the Festival of Wood and Barrel-Aged Beer this November. The two-day festival and competition is the largest of its kind in North America, bringing more than 150 of the world's top brewers to the heart of Chicago. Sample more than 350 one-of-a-kind barrel-aged beer, cider, mead, and perry from 13 style categories, and cheer on your favorite breweries as they compete for top honors in the nationally recognized competition. It's all happening at the Festival of Wood and Barrel-Aged Beer in Chicago, November 22nd and 23rd. Grab your crew and get your tickets now at fobab.com. That's FOBAB.com. Great event. Went last year. Love it. And highly encourage everyone out there to check it out. Now, my interview with Greg. Welcome to the podcast, Greg.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you so much.
This is fun. You had reached out to me last year sometime on Facebook and connected, and we're a podcast listener, and we're trying to find a way to connect. And of course, here we are now in Dania Beach, Florida at Three Sons Lumberjack Day, and finally got a chance to meet face to face and talk here on the podcast, which is really fun too. And I'm trying to pick your brain because I am going to head off to Poland in December for Craft Roku and the Craft Brewers Symposium, and I'm looking forward to experiencing the Polish world of craft beer, which is a wildly creative one these days and rapidly growing. Seems like the Poland in particular, of European countries there has really taken to craft beer, maybe more so than some of its neighbors, with more established and regimented, rigid brewing cultures. And and so I'm curious to understand what's happening in the world of Polish craft beer these days, and then kind of look at how you all brew some pretty cool, crazy things like mixed culture grodziskie, aged on fruit. Things are just blowing my mind. We'll talk a little bit about that. But anyway, just why don't you start off? Give me the history of Mostów.
Sure thing.
Mostów.
Jamie, thanks so much for having me. I've been a big fan. I've been listening to your podcasts, listening to great interviews. So thanks for doing that.
Oh, thank you.
It feels very special to be part of the podcast now. So, as you said, I'm Grzegorz Ziemian from Poland. And with my wife Arleta, we founded a brewery called Brewers Mostów, which you pronounce perfectly. And we're based in...
you can be honest with me. You don't have to tell me that I did it well.
Really, you did well.
Well, thank you.
And we're based in the southwestern city of Poland called Wrocław, which is a beautiful city. That's where the river called Oder branches around the city, which creates lots of bridges. The city got nicknamed the Venice of the North, or eventually City of 100 Bridges. And that's exactly how we called our brewery. So that's the Brewery of 100 Bridges. So most of that's what it means. And we've been going on for, this year will be our 10th anniversary. So we are one of the older ones in terms of craft beer in Poland, which, as you said, is basically... we've seen it all. We've seen it all in terms of Polish craft beer scene.
Yeah. So you decided to start this brewery 10 years ago. What was the impetus to do this? To strike out, and what said, hey, we should open a craft brewery making small, interesting style beers here in Wrocław?
You want the short version or long version? I'll try to make it quick. No, it's a good question. Myself, I lived in the US for quite a long time. I think it was almost 13 years. I did my undergraduate studies. And then when I moved into a professional career, which was in finance, that's when I actually started enjoying American craft beer. So much that it just became normality for me, because over here it's basically everywhere. In 2010, decided to go back to Europe. Got engaged to Arleta. We planned our marriage, and sort of like the middle step was my graduate studies in Barcelona, and that's when. Things started shifting in my head, because all the craft beer that I loved so much in Europe back then wasn't as available. So when we eventually moved back to Poland, which was 2012, Poland had even less craft beer than Spain. One crazy evening, we popped the question, hey, how about opening a craft brewery? We
can complain about it, or we can try to do something about
it.
Right.
Exactly. So initially it was sort of a crazy idea, almost a joke. But literally next day we seriously talked about it. We started diving into the details, how to create a brewery, how to finance it, and in all these sort of details. And since I was freshly out of a business school, I had all the tool sets to start working on a proper business plan. So Arleta and I, we focused our pretty much whole time to research the industry, talk to people from the industry. Took us a year until we had everything in terms of business plan completed. And that's when we started actually working on the brewery. So we got financing that we required, and we brewed our first beers in December of 2014.
2014. And so, tell me, what have been some of the milestones and highlights in that 10-year history?
Wow. Obviously, since the beginning, we wanted to do the best possible job. We didn't want to compromise on anything, so we focused on getting the best possible technology we could afford, hire best people to work with us, and this strategy paid off. And so we definitely grew much faster than we initially expected. Which then required, more investment projects, more expansions. Sure. The big building that seemed to be big initially started to be too small. So yeah, I think.
How much beer do you produce in a year now?
Now we are like last year we did 10,000 hectoliters.
Yeah.
This year we're shooting for about 25% growth. So,
wow.
And so this year we'll probably hit our maximum output. So pretty soon we'll have to start having discussions whether this is good enough volume for us, and we'll just keep going and keep enjoying this as is, or start thinking about building something even bigger.
When you say best equipment, what describe the brewery now to me?
So we have a Brewing system. So that's a fairly
right.
high-end equipment out of Bavaria in Germany. They've been a great partner since the beginning. They helped us position the equipment properly, pick what we would need to do what we wanted to do.
Sure.
And we went with them through 2 expansions. So initially we got a 3-vessel, 20-hectare brew house. Now we have added 2 more vessels to that, which allow us to basically brew up to 8 brews per day.
Wow.
It's fully automatic, so yeah, guys are really enjoying driving it.
Fully automated 5-barrel brew house. Yeah, for a brewery that size, that sounds like a beautiful luxury.
Yeah. So basically, with this equipment, we have lots of flexibility. Our product portfolio is pretty wide. I mean, we do historic styles, the traditional styles like Pilsner. We also rediscovered a beer style called schöps from our region, which was pushed out like 200 years ago. So we kind of recreated this recipe. We brew it up until now. Obviously, we do all the hazy stuff, lots of sours, pastry sours. And 2 years ago, we launched a second brewery, which is dedicated to mixed fermentation beers.
Interesting. 2 years ago, you launched a mixed fermentation brewery.
Yes.
It seems like the timing is challenging for that.
Well, the timing recent years has been challenging just in general.
Right.
I mean, first COVID, then the war, next door to Poland. It created lots of challenges. So we literally can confirm that the saying "what doesn't kill you makes you stronger" really, really works.
What was the drive to create a second mixed culture focused brewery? You all are producing larger volume of, more popular styles in a broad range of typical craft beer styles. There has to be a kind of a deep love of mixed culture beer to want to engage in that kind of investment space.
Yeah. You nailed it. I mean, this second brewery is obviously much smaller, but we do feel passion for these type of beers. I believe we are the first brewery in Poland that started doing these at this scale. Obviously, it's much smaller scale than the Clean Brewery, but yeah, we do around 10, 12 releases per year of all kinds of mixed fermentation beers. We use local ingredients. We try to play around. Like, for example, the beer that we have on the table that we want to probably chat about a little bit. So yeah, this is something that allows us to be even more creative and basically even expand our portfolio, which is already pretty wide.
Sure, and this beer in particular stood out to me because it's unusual in so many ways. Number one, grodziskie, which is historic Polish smoked wheat, beer, and then you have brewed this one with a mixed culture fermentation, and then gone and aged it on pears, right?
Exactly, smoked pears.
Smoked pears.
Yeah.
So it's a smoked wheat beer with smoked pears. It's ostensibly connected to this grodziskie tradition, but what that describes is maybe more of some of the ingredients and then the ABV expectation, because I think it's like 3.7%.
Exactly.
It's a small, easily drinkable beer for a smoked beer. But talk to me about this, because this both feels unusual to me, but also really interesting, because I love smoked beer. I loved grodziskie, and this context for it is a different one, maybe actually historical in some way or another. Not that it needs to have this historical tie in order to be valid or interesting. It can certainly just be a new take also. But there was a point where I'm sure a lot of these beers were just mixed culture beers, because that's what beer was. But talk to me about how forming the idea for doing this, because it's also interesting to think about building some idea of mixed culture beer that also is Polish.
Yes, and so basically, I'm not a fan of smoked beers.
I'll forgive you then.
But this is, funny enough, an origin of this beer. So our team of brewers, they wanted to create something that perhaps would convince me to drink these type of beers. So they actually brewed this without me knowing. So I learned about this one when it was already in the barrel. So it's kind of a funny inside story. But yeah, I mean, grodziskie is coming back. It's a very interesting style, and more and more Polish craft brewers, and probably not only Polish breweries, are going back to this style, because it's very unique, and it's one of the few beers that we can say they're truly Polish. So generally speaking,
the Polish diaspora here in America, from Tom at Goldfinger and Doosan and Live Oak, they've embraced grodziskie, and thankfully more and more brewers have been following along, and so we actually get a decent number of grodziskies here in the United States, but it's fun to see this kind of approach coming from a Polish brewery.
Yeah, and just to finish up my little anecdote, I gotta say to my guys that I'm really enjoying this beer. And as crazy it sounds, it's lots of things that are happening in this beer. As you said, it's a light wheat smoky beer as a base. We aged it in our mixed fermentation brewery with our house cultures. And then,
but the tartness in this is very soft and kind of citric. It's definitely a lactic sour, and not really a heavy funk. There's not a lot of Brettanomyces influence in this right now. That may appear, a year from now as this ages even more, but it feels, softer, subtler, with a citrus character to it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Also, the pears that we added, we smoked in our tap room. We have a proper smoker. We do barbecue dishes. So pears definitely added a fruitiness to this. So yeah, it's a crazy creation, but I think it works. We released it not long ago, and as you said, we kept some bottles, and it'll be really interesting to see how it ages, and we'll keep opening bottles. We'll probably rebrew it.
I love beers that carry this much flavor at that small of a size. Well, this is an outlier beer for you, obviously, a small special project served at a festival like this. But when people think of your brewery, what do most craft beer consumers in your region associate with your brewery? What are you best known for?
That's a good question. Over the years, especially last years, we've been refocusing our distribution strategy, and so we've been connecting more and more to our city of Wrocław. So definitely our traditional beers are our strong point. So, for example, our Pilsner, which now uses all Polish hops, the schöps that I mentioned is a big part of our portfolio.
Tell me more about schöps. I've never heard of this beer style before.
It's a beer that dominated our region a couple of centuries ago, and it was a 100% wheat beer, and as lagers were coming over from Germany, this beer was being pushed away, and it was brewed basically by every brew pub, karczma back then. So it was a little bit funky because it was brewed in different conditions, aged in wooden barrels, so you had a little bit of sourness coming from it. But it's also a nice story for us because one day we were just discussing what to brew, what type of beers to bring back to our portfolio or bring to our portfolio, and with our good friend John Brower. He suggested we think about this schöps, and obviously we had lots of beers that evening, and everybody agreed it was a great idea. And then
never had the right number of beers to then agree that this was a great idea.
Yeah, until next day when we started planning it, we learned that there was no recipe that survived. So we spent another few months to find any sort of information about this beer, and with a few beer historians, we managed to get quite a bit of information on the profile of the beer. So with the profile of the beer, we managed to create a recipe that we believe is very close to what was the old schöps.
So you took descriptions, the way that people wrote about and described the flavor, and then tried to reverse engineer that into a recipe.
Precisely. Yeah, so it was kind of a time traveling for us because we had to study the brewing techniques of those days, and it was a really fun project. So it is a wheat beer, but a little bit darker because, as you said, it was wheat back then.
It would have been probably dried in a kiln. In contact with smoke, right? Yeah,
exactly. And since it was aged in wooden barrels, you had certain amount of sourness coming from this aging. We found some citations that nutmeg was also added. It was generally a full beer, so some poems said it was actually a filling meal in form of a beer. So yeah, it was a very, very cool project. It took us a while. We did a few prototypes. We found some yeast that was supposed to be yeast of schöps in some of the yeast banks. So yeah, it's another cool story that we undertook, and I think we created something or recreated something special.
You found some yeast that may have been schöp yeast. How describe that to me?
So we found a few, and so as we were doing, so basically in the yeast banks, and you can search by name or by profile. So the first that we tried was, in our opinion, too close to a Weizen yeast, so we scratched that one. And based on descriptions and discussions with beer historians, we decided that it should be more sort of like neutral ale yeast. So that's what we now use. So you don't have these banana clove characteristics of a Hefeweizen. This is more of an ale, but sort of going in a sourish direction and like pretty full. So yeah, it's an interesting beer.
It's interesting. Why would they have brewed 100% wheat beer in that kind of era? Is it just a more common grain?
That question I didn't ask, but it's a great question. Obviously, they had lots of problems with filtration, so we learned that they used like I forgot the English word, like straws, like to create a way of filtration,
like rice hulls.
Yeah. But we didn't have rice back then,
right.
so yeah. I think that you're right. That your guess is probably very good. That back then wheat was like the main grain
Sure.
grown around our area.
And all brewing was local, and and using the ingredients right at hand. What else goes into that beer? I'm curious. Just a little bit of hops, I imagine.
Very little hops.
Yeah.
Very little hops. Pretty much no hops, I would say.
Aged hops or just regular hops.
We use regular hops.
So this isn't quite like in the lambic or farmhouse kind of Belgian tradition either. It's kind of veers on its own a little bit. I mean, you see like common threads through this area, right? Because there's a band where certain grains are going to be grown, and hops are going to be and they make kind of beers, but they all have a little bit of a different local flavor to them wherever you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Any other beers that that the brewery is well known for? Tell me about brewing hazy IPA in Poland. The concept of it is novel, but interesting also. There's this part of me that hates seeing this style win out over more local and regional things. I think it's interesting to have different beers wherever you go, but I also see the allure of hazy IPA, and I also understand why Americans love brewing European beer styles too. And so I love this back and forth of it going in both directions, and Polish brewers bringing on a fundamentally American beer style like hazy IPA. It's mind blowing. And but kind of cool. So talk to me about how you you go about creating an identity for that beer in Poland.
Probably similar to many other markets, an IPA was sort of like the key in terms of kickstarting the craft beer revolution. So it was the same in Poland. Some of the heavy hopped and back then very bitter beers were produced by the first craft breweries in Poland, and that's what got consumers interested in beer again. I mean, Poland is a big consumer of beer in general, but back then and still to these days, it's mostly like mass-produced Euro lagers. So when crazily hopped IPAs came to the market, that's what brought like big attention to consumers. And yeah, it's like, so just to give you an idea, our top 3 sellers, depending on like a month, so basically they shift around, but it's our Pilsner, American Pale Ale, and American IPA. Yeah, we love our Pilsner.
All those things together too. That's great.
Yeah. But yeah, it's what people really like to drink. And yeah, like especially these days when we have access to higher quality ingredients. Polish craft brewers also make good IPAs.
How do you create an identity for the IPAs that you all make, so that that they're both quality and people fulfill people's expectations for those, but also have a personality for your brewery? Or is that too much of a technical brewing question?
No, not necessarily. I mean, obviously, like we travel to many festivals. We have friends in like breweries all around the world. So we definitely compare our beers to their beers. And then, I mean, I have to say that the American market, American breweries have always been a driving force behind IPAs, and I don't think this is an exaggeration that like breweries around the world try to follow American breweries in terms of IPAs. I mean, best IPAs are brewed in here, so like it's hard to create something different, especially in the global market when goods can be shipped all around. Brewing something as good as an American IPA brewed in the US in the local market, that's sort of like the goal of Polish craft brewers.
Sure.
That's to Mostów.
And with a style like hazy IPA that is so delicate, anything that you'd have shipped over from the United States by the time it got there would not be good.
Exactly.
And so it has to be made locally and drunk fresh to truly be enjoyable and understood in the way that it's the intention behind it.
Right. Yeah.
But tell me about American Pale Ale. This is the other thing. I saw so much of this when we were in the Czech Republic. It was interesting. I mean, and I think we overstate some of this. It's not like, there's a ton of American Pale Ale being sold in the Czech Republic. It's all still pale lager, and then any other style is still just a very small fraction. But it's interesting to me to see American Pale Ale on so many, as such a thing. It's almost a bigger thing amongst European craft brewers than it is outside of, say, the one big brand in the United States of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. That it's almost one beer here, and then it's a style that's brewed more frequently amongst craft brewers in Europe.
Yeah, especially in recent years, we've seen a trend away from higher ABVs to lower ABVs and almost like non-alco beers. So pale ale is much more easier going beer. You can have few more of them, and they tend to be as popular as IPAs, and I think that's the main reason that people love the sort of the citrusy flavors and aromas in pale ales and IPAs, but not necessarily want to drink high ABV beers.
Sure. Well, are there any other beers that are particular favorites of yours that you're proud of the creative work that you all have put into making them?
Yeah, Baltic porters.
Baltic porters, okay.
Yes.
I think when I make it to Poland this December, we should put together a panel discussion of some sort on Baltic porter that we can share out with the podcast audience, because it seems like something we should talk about in Poland.
Yeah, I mean, Polish brewers would like to believe that it's another Polish style, but this is not as clear-cut as with grodziskie. So
right.
In terms of Baltic porters, we have this little fight with other countries around the Baltic Sea, like who really invented Baltic porter. But for the sake of this discussion, let's say it's another Polish beer style. And yeah, it's to Mostów.
Polish and Poland adjacent.
Yes, that's a nice way of putting it. And yeah, so that's another beer style that we really like to brew. So this is actually around the time now that we start brewing them. There's actually a Baltic Porter Day in January, so we try to have our fresh Baltic Porters ready closer to Christmas, and then plan like a nice celebration of this style in January. And obviously we do a more traditional approach to Baltic Porter, and we do some crazy versions, including barrel aging of that. So it's a really nice style. Many Polish breweries are proud of the ones that they make. They actually get medals at some top competitions around the world. So yeah, we also try to do our best with this style.
Well, we will save the technical discussion for a later day, but I would love to have a deeper discussion about brewing Baltic Porter with Polish brewers. As we wrap up here, if people are interested in trying your beer, obviously our listenership is about 75% the United States, 25% other places, Australia, Asia, a lot of Europe. Your beer is not necessarily going to be available all of those places, but if people want to come and experience it, how can they experience it?
Obviously, we invite all the listeners to visit our beautiful city of Wrocław. We have 3 tap rooms around the city. We also organize, sorry for auto promotion, but we also organize a nice beer festival in April called Beer Geek Madness. Also bring lots of breweries from around the country, Europe, and also from the US and other parts of the globe. We focus mainly on our region in terms of distribution for many reasons that but also we export quite a bit, around 15%, mostly in Europe. But we, like with this festival at Three Suns, we're having some really good discussions with an importer who is interested in working with us. So there's a chance that our beers will be more available in the US as well. We have some end customers that are kind of ready to go as soon as we get the whole import process squared away.
Well, I'm here for more Baltic porter, and I'm here for more mixed culture grodziskie as soon as they can get it over here on a more regular basis. Super excited about that. Well, Greg, thanks for joining me and talking with me here in this Three Sons Lumberjack Day podcast session. It's been fun, and I can't wait to see you in a few months in Poland, in Wrocław and Krakow.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jamie, for inviting me, and looking forward to welcoming you in Poland.
Cheers.
Cheers.
That's it for this week's episode, but stay tuned next week for a thoughtful conversation on foeder lager brewing with Eric Tennant of Benchtop Brewing in Norfolk, Virginia. I recorded that one a month ago. And then, of course, last week, Eric went and won a silver medal at GABF in the Keller beer category for his beer pilsners or lagers. Timing could not be any more impeccable. And I'll probably have a few more GABF Gold episodes over the next month or two, talking to more award-winning brewers about how they've made their noteworthy beers. And, I'm sure we'll have an episode or two from the panel discussions at our upcoming Brewers Retreat in Delaware. We'll see how it all shakes out. But in the meantime, choose G&D chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring. ProBrew offers 2 to 4 week lead time on in-stock rotary can fillers and seamers. Old Orchard is your go-to source for fruit-forward ingredients for some of the biggest names in the craft brewing landscape. Omega Yeast's Daybreak 5 gives you juicy modern hop flavors without the haze. 5-Star Chemicals cleaning solutions are specifically formulated to meet the unique needs of breweries. Take back control of your canning and seaming with the experts at RSS Macklin. Trust Indie Hop's unique varieties to modernize, brighten, and diversify your beer lineup. Berkeley yeast strains are designed to improve flavor, quality, and consistency. And don't miss the Festival of Wood and Barrel-Aged Beers this November 22nd in Chicago. If you've enjoyed this episode or any others, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, and become a subscriber to Craft Beer and Brewing if you aren't already. We absolutely depend on your subscriptions to help keep this whole thing going. We are an independent business, independently owned, owner-operated, 100% employee-owned, in fact. And so your support means all the difference to us, especially in this fall holiday coming season. If you're thinking about ways to give back, just consider giving a gift to yourself that also helps us keep this thing going for you. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, cheers. This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.